Hello everyone. In this session, I am going to explaining about what is contract and its classification. A contract. A contract is an agreement enforceable by law. In simple word, contract is not just any agreement, but one that law will recognize and enforce it. In simple words, the agreement which are enforceable by law is called as a contract. It means that all the agreements are not treated as contract. Only those agreements which are supported and accepted by the law is called as contract. Similarly, a contract is an agreement that creates a legal relationship between the parties. For example, Mr. X agreed to supply to Mr. Y for some goods for rupees 10,000. It is called as a contract because there is an agreement between A and B. Similarly, the X will pay rupees 10,000 after the contract is completed. Here, the legal relationship between the Mr. X and Y is created, namely buyer and seller. Similarly, take some other cases. For example, the father agreed to give a gift to his son if he secured first mark in business law subject. It is not treated as a contract because here the legal relationship does not exist between the parties. Here the blood relationship, namely father and son, is available. So it is not treated as a contract. Therefore, the contract should create a legal relationship. Similarly, it should be accepted and supported by the law. In simple word, a contract includes two important elements. One is agreement and enforceable by law. Agreement. An agreement means one person give the offer to someone else and another person should accept that the same. The another person accept the offer which is given by the offerer and in the same sense it becoming the agreement. So the agreement consists of offer and acceptance. Similarly, if anyone break this agreement, the other person can go to the court to get the justice. It means that he agreed to sell his house to Mr. B. Unfortunately, B not pay the amount. At the time, A have the rights to have the legal protections from this misconduct of Mr. B by the way of approaching the court. Therefore, the contract include two important elements, namely agreement and enforceable by law. Now we move on to the next topic, classification of contract. The contracts are classified based on the validity, based on the formation, and based on the performance. Based on the validity, contracts are classified into valid contract, voidable contract, void contract, illegal contract, unenforceable contract. A valid contract. Valid contract is one that contains all the essential elements of the contract. Namely, it has a legal offer and it should be accepted by someone else. For that purpose, both the parties give the considerations. The purpose of the contract should be a legal one and there is a good purpose for that contract and the consideration should be a legal one. So it is called as a valid contract and it is fully supported by the law and it can be enforced by the law is called as valid contract. For example, A agreed to sell a mobile phone for rupees 10,000 and the buyer agrees to pay the amount. All the legal rules are followed here. So the contract is called as valid contract. And the second one is called as void contract. The void contract has no legal effect and it is not enforceable by law. It does not create any legal relationship between the two parties. For example, an agreement with the minor. A agreed to sell his house to Mr. B. Here the B is a minor person. So this contract is called as a void contract. Similarly, an agreement is ended without any consideration. There is a relationship between the two parties having no legal relationship. It's a search for in a friendship and blood relationship. That contract is called as void contract. The another one of the contract is called as voidable contract. Voidable contract is a valid at the beginning, but can be cancelled by any one of the parties. It means that An agreement which is enforceable by law at the opinion of one or more parties thereto. This is happen when the essential elements of free consent in a contract is missing. When the consent of the party is not free, that is, a person involved into the contract by the way of coercion, undue influence, or fraud, it is called as the voidable contract. At this time, the party has consent is not free. Either the party cancel the contract or continue the contract. Take example, A promised to sell his car to B for rupees 20,000. His consent is obtained by other person by the force. The contract is voidable at the opinion of the A. He may avoid the contract or he may continue the contract. It's called as voidable contract. And next one is called as illegal contract. A contract which is carried out with an unlawful activities is called as illegal contract. Such contract is not only illegal or void but also involve the punishment. In similarly, an illegal agreement is not only void as between the immediate parties, but has an further effect that even the collateral transaction becomes illegal. A collateral transaction is one which is subsidiary to the immediate contract or is a main contract. For example, B borrow rupees 5,000 from A and enter into the contract with an aim of importing the prohibited goods. A know the purpose of the loan. Here, A enter into the contract to B to borrow the loan for 5,000 for his business purpose, but his business is belonging to the prohibited goods. Knowingly, B give the loan to A. At the time, the contract is prohibited goods is illegal. Similarly, the borrowing between the A and the B contract is also treated as a illegal one. So it is not only affect the main contract, the illegal contract is having the subsequent effect to the additional contract made in relation to this contract. And the last contract is called as unenforceable contract. This is a contract that is otherwise valid but can be enforced due to the technical issues like missing the required signature or being in writing. That is, unenforceable contract is a contract which cannot be enforced in the court of law because of some technical factors. Take example, Mr. Y purchased the car from Mr. X. Unfortunately, he is not transfer his RC book in his name. Due to the technical fault, A is not claimed it is my car. Likewise, if we purchase any building, land, etc., we must be obtain the contract through the stamp papers. If the party is failed to register the same, it will not be enforceable in the court of the law. The next contract is called as based on the formation. Based on the formation, the contracts are classified into three headings, namely express contract, implied contract, and another one is called as quasi-contract. Express contract. In express contract is formed through clear words, either spoken or written. For example, if X enter into the contract with the Y for selling his house, in a written stamp paper is called as express agreement. Similarly, yes, give order to the restaurants by way of delivering the tea or coffee. Here, X given a specific and by the way of giving the words, it is called as express agreement. If the terms of the contracts are especially agreed upon at the formation of the contract is said to be a express agreement. And another one is called as implied contract. An implied contract is not a spoken or written, but it is understood that the contract or action of these parties involved. In simple, a implied contract is one which is inferred from the act or conduct of the parties. For example, Mr. A enter into the government bus or public bus. It means that A agrees to take the ticket for this bus. Similarly, if he enter into the restaurants for taking a cup of coffee, it implies that the person will pay the amount for it. It is called as implied condition. And next one is called as a quasi contract. A quasi-contract is not an actual contract, but it is treated from the law. Strictly speaking, a quasi-contract is not a contract at all. A contract is intentionally entered into the parties without any legal objects. A quasi-contract, on the other hand, is created by the law. It resembles a contract in a legal application is imposed on a party who is required to perform it. It rests on the ground of the equity that a person shall not allowed to enrich himself and the expenses of the other. For example, A. Traders leave the goods at C's house by mistake. C treat the goods as his own. Now C is bound to pay for the goods. Is called as the quasi-contract. So the quasi-contract is created unfortunately by the way of law, not by the intentionally. Based on the execution or based on the performance of the contract, contracts are classified into four headings, namely executed contract, executory contract, unilateral contract, and bilateral contract. Executed contract. The name itself gives the meaning of this contract. Executed means both the contract is completed. In the executed contract is one where both the parties have fully performed their promise of the contract is called as executed contract. Here the contract is completed. For example, a person buy a book and pay for it immediately. The seller gives the book and the buyer gives the money in this contract. Since both the persons fulfill their performance, the contract is said to be a executed contract. The next one is called as executory contract. A contract which ongoing one is called as executory contract. A executory contract is one where some or all the parties of the contracts are yet to be performed. This means that either one party or both the parties still have to complete to do or under the contract. It is a running or binding contract only. For example, a person agreed to buy 100 shares from Mr. Y. Mr. Y can deliver the goods to Mr. A, but A still not pay the amount or not accept this share is called as executory contract. Sometimes both the parties are not fulfill the contract. For example, A agreed to deliver 100 share in next week. Similarly, at the time of the delivery, Mr. B agreed to pay the amount. Here, both the parties are not complete their task. It is also called as a executory contract. Based on that, the executory contract are classified into two categories, namely unilateral executory and bilateral executory contract. Unilaterally executory contract. In unilaterally executory contract, only one party has to perform the contract and another one not fulfill the contract. For example, A agreed deliver to book to Mr. B. Here the B pay the advance amount, but still date the A is not deliver the books. It is a unilateral executory. Bilateral executory contract. By means both. Here, both the parties are failed to deliver the contract or failed to complete the contract is called as bilateral contract. And next one is called as unilateral contract. In unilateral contract, only one parties make a promise and the other parties accept it by performing the specific act. For example, a person offer ₹1,000 to anyone who find and return the lost dog. Here, only one person is offered it. So far, nobody is accepted the contract because the contract is accepted only when we find the dog. One the persons who find made the offer has given to our promise. The contract is completed when someone finds and returns the dog. It is called as unilateral contract. Bilateral contract. A bilateral contract is a contract where both the parties make the promise to each other. Each party has something to do under the contract. The promise are made at the time of the agreement and the performance is executed in the future only. For example, a person agreed to sell a computer for rupees 20,000. The seller give the computer in the next week and the buyer will pay deliver on deliver. Since both the parties made a promise, but they are not complete their promise, It is called as a bilateral contract. These are the classification of the contract. Thank you.